This is Keeping It Real in the Film World, and I'm your host, Thomas Kenyon, and I'm on a mission. A mission to connect filmmakers of the world. My goal is to talk with people holding titles on that scrolling list of credits at the end of movies, right here on Keeping It Real in the Film World. Welcome back to another episode of Keeping It Real in the Film World. I talk with Marc Isaacs. He's not from Texas, but he's since moved to Texas, so he's one of those that can say, I wasn't born here, but got there as fast as he can. We talk a little bit about that. And his current production, he's working on The Legend of Marshall Dead. Currently a short, but bigger aspirations for it to be a TV series. We talk a little bit about that. You can check out Marc Isaacs. He has an IMDb page. He is formerly an actor, a SAG actor. imdb.com/Marc Isaacs. Marc Isaacs with a C, Marc. Some of his works that he's known for, on Prime, you can watch The Example that he's been a part of, and Turning the Hands of Time. Other works that he's also known for is Geico and Fatal Encounters. And we talk with him a little about working with Burton Gilliam on The Legend of Marshall Dead. But let me introduce to you now, one the only, Marc Isaacs. Well, let's welcome back to another season. This is starting season 3 of In the Film World with me. I'm Sweet Tea. Today I'm talking with, to get it all started, Marc Isaacs. Hello, Marc. Tell us a little bit about your background and where you're from. And
Well, thanks for having me. First of all, I really appreciate it. I am from upstate New York and transplanted myself to Texas in 2001, and I've done a lot of different things. I've been a content creator for television and radio long ago, and syndicated programming and news, and I've kind of found myself back in Texas now as a filmmaker.
it's like that saying, not from here, but you moved here as fast as you could.
Yeah, I mean, Lyle Lovett has a song about it. You're not from Texas, but Texas wants you anyway.
Nice. I started, but I was born in Houston, Texas, but I pretty much always consider starting my life in New York, out on Long Island. There for 5 years, but we moved right back to Texas as a family. How far along are you on this project? I'm just so I can get a good pinpoint on on were you just getting started?
In the big picture, we're just getting started. We've been going since May, and we're still filming. So we've got one more production day, and then we head into post, and we go from there. So it's
So,
been going a while, but we have it's a bigger vision. So we have a vision for a series. So in some ways, we're really at the very beginning of just getting our proof of concept ready to be pitched as a TV series this year.
so production you said was going since May.
No. I mean, we started development in May, and then
Like
production
pre
started
like
in November.
the
Yeah,
the
well, we
the,
didn't start.
the very beginning in May.
Yeah, that's when the
Okay,
origin started. Yeah.
pre-production. And but I just like to now start off with a few questions I always like to start off with. What
Okay.
are you most excited about today?
Well, the thing I'm most excited about is I started working with a team of people on a Western project when I was still in Studio City, California, in the Valley north of Los Angeles back in May, and we started working on a Western um, as an episodic, as a series idea. And now here, 7 months later, we're in the midst of production. We're in the midst of actually making it happen. We've had some shoot days. We've launched a Facebook page, an Instagram page. We've got an IMDb page, and it's all under the Legend of Marshall Dead. So we've got this awesome Western project that's set in 1858. Most of it's set in 1858. And it's got some historical events as a part of it, some real life things that happen in Texas. Although it's all original characters, the story's original, the characters original. And I'm excited to move through production. We've got more production to do, more filming to do after the first of the year, and then we get into editing. We move into post and make it look as sweet and awesome as possible, and get ready to pitch it as a series to shoot, an ongoing series to shoot here in Texas.
I'm going. I, I understand the whole thing with setting up Facebook pages and dealing with the back end. I'm right now going through like a little redesign on my website, and I've been spending a lot of time on that. So
It takes a lot of effort, doesn't it? Like you realize just how much energy goes into that part of marketing something. The creative energy as a filmmaker consumes a lot of bandwidth for us, but then this other part that we have to get out the message that, hey, we're doing something cool. It consumes even more of our time and energy.
another question I like to just open up with: what are you most grateful for?
At this point, I am really grateful for the people whose paths have crossed who've given me a lot of advice over the years. Whether it was here in Texas, I'd go to workshops and talk to people who knew much more than I did, and kind of set me in the motion of being okay to not know things. Coming from a place where you don't know something means you can ask questions. You can show your curiosity and even kind of reveal your ignorance about something, and they will give you good answers. They'll give you help. I mean, I'm talking about people from music composers like Scott Sabo in Houston, and directors of photography like Larry McKee, who worked on this project with us. If you come from a place of not knowing something and you're just wanting to investigate, um, people are willing to help you. I went to a lot of workshops in Los Angeles, a lot of TV workshops, writing workshops, filmmaking workshops, acting workshops, and the professionals that I got a chance to be exposed to, um, they share so much. I mean, they're willing to open up and tell you what you need to know if you're willing to listen, and it becomes our job to you decide what advice works for us and follow it through. I mean, there's people out there giving advice every day to people who aren't listening. And so I'm grateful for the people like that who are willing to um, give of their time, to share their expertise, to show us a better way to get things done. Because that takes a lot of energy from them. Sometimes they're not getting paid for it. Sometimes they're taking time out from their schedule to give us advice and to give us direction. So what we need to do is listen and pay attention, and they're kind of giving us some clues on how to skip some steps, find some loopholes, and manage ourselves and manage our projects better. And I'm just eternally grateful for them because they're making life easier in some ways. And they're also making it acceptable to go, hey, this is going to be hard. You're going to have some setbacks. They kind of normalize the fact that filmmaking and any kind of content creation is a bit of a beast. It's a burden. There's going to be mistakes made. You're going to have fires to put out and challenges to deal with every day. So they've kind of reminded me that even at days where I feel like I failed at something, I learned something from the failure, and I can forge ahead and move on.
Is there a specific day or a specific production that you've worked on that you remember and it takes you back to one of your biggest lessons?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for asking that. I worked in 2012 on a project it was a faith-based film in Houston in Southeast Texas, and it was based on the director's life. It was actually true events based on her life. And one of the lessons I learned in that is um, not to take on more than you can handle. And I think with that particular project, um, one of the focuses for the director was trying to really replicate her life story. And and it was a first time director. It was somebody who hadn't directed before, someone who hadn't really worked on productions before. And it was in some ways a big disaster. There was a lot of challenges we had with it, with locations and with other issues that came up. But it also reminded me, as after I worked on it, that when you assess what you're going to do, be realistic. And if you don't have the means in place to do something properly, um, it's okay to step away. It's okay to turn down work. It's okay to say this is too much, to draw boundaries for yourself as a professional. I'm used to saying yes to everything. I'm used to people, asking me something, and I'll bend over backwards and accommodate and try to make it work, and that gets us in trouble. That gets us in trouble sometimes. It gets us, puts us in places of frustration. We get upset. We know that we're not delivering at 100%. So I think the big lesson there overall is like recognize your own boundaries. When you're working with people, when you're collaborating, know what might be too much for you, and don't be afraid to say, "Hey, this is too much. This is not reasonable. What we're trying to accomplish." There was one particular day where we were at three locations in one day, and I'll give you an example of how this impacted me. As I was producing and I was on camera, and the first two locations I was producing at, the third location I was on camera. So we were at the first location was a bed and breakfast. The second location was a diner. Third location was a hospital. So all day long, 12 hours or so, I'm producing, and in the third location, I'm acting. And we're in the middle of shooting the scene with the actress, the lead actress in the film, and I'm in the scene with her, and she's talking to me, and I'm supposed to be talking to her, and I'm watching her talk to me, and I haven't flipped my brain from producer to actor, so I'm just watching her performance. I'm in the scene, but I'm watching her performance, and she finishes talking, and I say nothing. And my brain had not realized, oh, that's right, I'm in the scene. I have dialogue. I've got lines right now to say because I've been working at that point probably 14 hours, and we were very understaffed. We had not an adequate crew. We were running and gunning. It's a big lesson to have that kind of situation happen. And you realize, yeah, I just got off meaning I can chill in this time, and I'll try not to make that happen again.
Yeah, you hear it a lot that about directors, actor they're actors first, and they step into a director role on the same set of a TV series or even a film, a bigger production like a film, and you, from the viewer's perspective, he's just telling himself what to do, but you acknowledge you for explaining in such a way that it shows that it's actually very hard to do. Just two roles. I know even people take on even more roles than that.
I think if you're going to direct yourself, you want to make sure that you have a good team around you, like people who are reliable, strong, strong team that you worked with before. So you're not having to reinvent the wheel working with them. So when you step in front of the camera and you're away from Video Village and you're not looking at the monitor anymore, that the people who are just have your back and are working at the same standard you are. I wouldn't even dare do that. I mean, this project I could have been an actor in as well. This Western, this Legend of Marshall Dead. But my thought was when I stepped on board after writing and doing a lot of the development of the story and then writing, as I stepped into the role of director, I said, no way am I going to be on camera for this because I really want to focus on directing other people. I really want to focus on that part of the job and seeing how we take the story we had in the script and bring it to life with real people and real settings and real props. And we had horses and, we had riding across the plains and we had, you know, gun shoots and things like that. So I didn't want to be thinking about being an actor in that because it's a whole other part of my brain. And it consumes a lot of energy thinking about what do I look like, do I look right, and am I saying the lines right? I didn't want any of that hassle. So more power to those people who are on a TV show and direct themselves in an episode. But typically they haven't done it in the first season. I mean, usually it's a little bit into the series. You'll see some of the lead actors' names pop up in season 2, 3, and beyond in some of these series that they know the show, they know the crew, they know the process of putting it all together. That they're not going to, unless it's the rare individual, they're not going to jump in the pilot or the first season and try to sit in the director's chair and take on a lead role. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, that's a good idea to just let it do your thing as actor, director before you start taking on multiple roles, and even then, like you said, it's not even when you're doing in front of the camera, you can't be doing both in front and behind, because I mean the director has to have eyes on screen or someone who's directing a shot has to have eyes on the scene as how it shows up on the screen.
Well, some directors like to look at the actual acting, like in person. They like to be close to where what's happening. A lot of directors like me, I want to be looking at what's in frame. I want to be looking at the monitor. I want to be seeing exactly what people are going to see when they watch at home or wherever this is going. And that to me means that I'm watching everything. I'm seeing everything within that frame. Every bit of it, every square inch. I'm getting a sense of, and does this work for what we need? So I don't know how you direct it with the actors. I mean, it's not theater. If it was a play, yeah, of course. But with this type of medium, like you have to be seeing what's on camera because that's only what's on camera is capturing what people are going to see, and that's where you got to start.
Going back to when you were first thinking about what was is there a moment or a like a idea that you said, hey, I want to do this and film, direct, act? Was there
Um,
a specific moment?
I think I was doing a lot of content creation for television, um, and I was watching good people who understood how to produce and shoot things, real stories, real people stories. And I love real people stories. I love things that are based in truth. And this project of ours is historical fiction, so it's based in truth, but the characters are made up. But when I was working in Houston, first working in Houston, I worked at a talk show, and we did a lot of shoots in the field of our guests. So you go and do your, how talk shows work. You go do your footage and your package of the guest, and you show the package, and then you introduce the guest. So I was doing a lot of that, and I was working with some fantastic photogs out of the ABC station there. And I was learning a lot about how they shoot, how they set things up, and I knew nothing of that. I mean, I hadn't worked in that capacity yet. That was 2001. I hadn't worked like that, and I liked that type of storytelling where it's not a news type story. Had done news before, where you go out and you interview somebody and you get a little bit of B-roll. But this was really crafting a story, even if it was just, say, a 90-second or 2-minute story, with these interesting visuals and pans and tilts and things like that. That to me seemed more artistic and more interesting. So I think it was around that time where I was first thinking about what would it be like. And I started meeting people who worked in filmmaking around that time. I hadn't really met people before that. It wasn't until I got to Texas that I started meeting filmmakers and people who worked producing larger production. I started getting acquainted with them, seeing their work, and understanding what was involved. But it took me a number of years to get to this point where I started writing more and more, and then seeing myself as a filmmaker. I was in a class in LA taught by Glenn Morshower, who's a wonderful character actor and a Texan. He's got weekly classes in Dallas at this point. I spent more than a year and a half in his class in LA and just started writing my own scripts and writing scripts for classmates. And I was writing scripts for people I'd worked with and respected, and I was workshopping them every Friday night in a super long class at the Extra Mile Acting Studio. So I was given a chance to take the stories I had, put them into scripts, workshop them, learn from them, go back and after the class and make changes and improve upon them, and then the next week do the whole thing again with new scripts. And I think that was really more the momentum of this has to happen. I have to be writing scripts and telling stories in the film world because I'm doing it right now. I'm practicing it and I'm working on it and I'm learning about it and I'm going to workshops and learning about television writing too. And I think for me, that was the turning point. It was 2017, 2018, and I'm writing, like I said, every week, and sometimes 6, 7 pages, a single scene, 6, 7 pages, a little bit long, but it was like equivalent to what would be a short film, and it was fun to write these characters. Some of them were real stories that were based on truth, and some of them were just weird and quirky and comedic, and some had potential for television, and some had potential for film. And it was just, it was very experimental. A very experimental time, and that actually led to getting hired, that kind of writing led to getting hired by a director in LA who's from Texas. Um, Earlier this year, Gilbert Sosa, who's a Houstonian, who's now in LA, hired me to write a comedic short for him called First Timers. And he just finished shooting that, and that's going to debut pretty soon. But he had seen some of my samples of my comedy writing from that class. He'd seen some of the stuff I had workshopped and liked it and liked the tone, the style. And in earlier this year, around springtime, we started collaborating. He gave me a story. I built on the story, and it's about these two, this couple, this high school couple, dealing with, thoughts of intimacy and romance at 18, and as they're ending their high school career and getting ready for the summer before college. So we focused this whole story on these two 18-year-olds, and it's a comedic story, and it's based in some truth. It's based in some real life challenges that young people have who are in love, and it was nice to be able to give him some samples and have Gilbert look at the things I've written in class and say, oh, this works, or I like this, or this reminds me of the piece of the story that I wanted to tell. And that's confirmation. When someone says, hey, I like your writing, or I like what you're doing, or I'd love to collaborate with you, it's hard to resist. It's very attractive. It's a very attractive quality for someone to say, this is good, or this is something I connect with. And I think that's, for me, is even more of the turning point this year, is to say, between helping, Gilbert and giving him a script, and then this Legend of Marshall Dead project. I mean, I'm spending probably at this point, 90% of my year on writing. I'm not doing as much acting right now. I'm doing a lot more writing. So I feel like now I'm shaping myself into a writer director through these experiences and seeing what 2020 brings.
To turn it off, I want to come back to the current production right now that you're working on, and goals, kind of on where you see it going once you're in post production and distribution. But first, I want to get to, like, what is your biggest achievement to date today?
Biggest achievement to date, I would say, would be when I created a TV show in Houston at a CBS station there. I got approached for one particular project, and then it was a home improvement project. An executive producer at the station brought me in, and we talked about this home improvement project, and then he gave the job to someone else and said, I've got something better for you. I got something that needs suited to you better. And it was a kids show. He was looking for someone to come in and co-create and produce a children's series set at the Houston Zoo. And so they had done things at the zoo before. I mean, sending out the weather guys to do interviews and things like that, but they had not done a series. And so we basically developed and executed the shooting of an entire season. So we had, I think it was like 12 episodes. I think it was something like 12 episodes at the zoo. And then our 13th episode was a studio episode. And we did 3 seasons of that. We did 3 seasons of the show. We called it Houston Superstars Challenge. It was a competition show for middle school kids all around the Houston area. So a team of middle schoolers from one school would be pitted against a team of middle schoolers from another school. And then if they won that episode, they would move on to the next, round, and then to the finals. And so there was 3 rounds of this. We built it from the ground up. I mean, we had a lot of help from the education department at the Houston Zoo and the PR department. But we basically built a brand new show, and it was a fun show. It was educational about animals. It was entertaining. It was quirky. It was, it was a tremendous undertaking to do that much. But at the same time, we ended up, getting nominated for Lone Star Emmys. And after the first season, when the first season played, and that was in fall of 2005, the zoo, who had understood this to be a certain type of show, realized this was a bigger deal. Like, this was a more involved show once we got through the first season. They realized, and we got the Lone Star Emmy nomination. They realized, oh, this is a good thing. I think there was a little bit of pushback from them about how much involvement we needed. I don't think they quite were prepared. I don't think we were quite prepared for how much involvement we needed of them. When you're creating something from the ground up, I mean, there's a lot um, communication that goes on, and there's a lot of decisions that get made, and we were just building something brand new, and so we made some mistakes along the way. We took on, goes back to what I said before. We took on more than we could handle at some moments, but we ended up creating something that had a lasting legacy. People liked the show. It ran for several seasons. It ran on repeats. It was well received. It was nice to build something from the ground up like that, and that's the kind of thing that I think I really enjoyed is is someone saying, "Hey, I have a mission for you. I can't really describe exactly what it's going to look like, but here's some nuts and bolts. I want you to figure out how the rest looks. I want you to flesh the rest out." And that's the most exciting thing to me. To tell you, it's someone to tell you you have the permission, you have the freedom to take what I give you, and you run with it. And there's nothing more freedom. There's nothing more like freeing for a storyteller or a filmmaker or a content creator of any kind to have that kind of leeway to do more than you were originally given.
Yeah. What would you say is it easier or harder to, like? Do you say we built it from the ground up to build something from the start, or is it versus like starting coming in after someone else has created a show and you're taking over the reins? Is which one's easier or harder, would you say?
Good question, because the
Left
talk
all.
show I mentioned, yeah, the talk show I mentioned to you was established and it had been run for several seasons, so I had to come in and learn their system. I mean, it's everything from their phone system to their computer system to the way they write to the way they shoot, and so you're really just you're observing everything, and you're trying to match what they're doing. So you're basically trying to simulate everything you're seeing around you, even if it feels foreign, even if it feels strange. That's harder to me. That was more challenging to me because I didn't know that environment. I hadn't worked on a talk show. I hadn't worked in Houston. I hadn't lived in Texas. Um, all of that, the whole experience when I landed in Houston back in 2001 was brand new. So I feel like that's harder because you're walking into an established environment where people know how to do things, and they look at you like you need to learn this too. You need to figure this out. So I was overwhelmed in that situation because I was trying to match the quality. I was trying to match the expectations with what they were doing, and it was a lot to take on all at once. So I think in some ways, building something from the ground up is easier because as long as you have some true freedom to do it, like I've had on the Marshall Bed project, you can make choices along the way and you can justify your choices. So if you're in an established environment, there's a process. If you're going to make a change, you better have a way to justify that. You better be able to tell somebody, hey, instead of doing it your way, we need to do it my way, or we should consider doing it my way because X, Y, and Z. Well, that's a lot. You're trying to sell somebody on your ideas. You're trying to sell somebody on your new way, and you're going to be met with a lot of resistance if they've done it for 4 or 5 years their way. So building from the ground up was, to me, is much easier because even though there's not necessarily, I don't have all the pieces in place as I go. I can figure out what I need and build the way I see it. And we've done that with this project. We've built it the way that I saw it, and I could justify it to the executive producer and one of the other producers. I could say, hey, this is why we need this. This is the direction we should take this in. This is the choice we should make. Because I felt like I knew what we needed. I could say it. I could advocate for it, and demonstrate why my idea was going to work or was a solid idea. So yeah, hands down, it's harder to walk into an established environment and try to assimilate.
It takes adapting. It takes learning why something was done rather versus something else.
Mm-hmm.
You listed a bunch of reasons, but what maybe the biggest reason why it was so memorable? This achievement. What was it called? Houston's Zoop? What was it called?
Oh, Houston Superstars Challenge.
Superstars. Why was it
Um,
so memorable?
I think because it was just so unique. People have seen the adult game shows at that time, and you've seen things like The Amazing Race and Survivor. but we weren't really seeing a lot of children's adventure and competition shows. At least I wasn't in 2005 when we were developing and first shooting that. I wasn't seeing those types of shows, and we kind of simulated some of the things you see in the reality shows where we had the talkbacks at the end of the segment where the kids would respond to what they had as challenges. And I think the thing that, to cut right through it, to just answer your question, I think as authentically as possible is this. As a kid, I would have loved to have been on this type of show. So to give the kids I was meeting, these were preteen kids, so they're ages 9 to 12. I would have loved at 9, 10, 11, or 12 to have been on television on a TV show like this. So I was remembering, I think, when I was producing it, I was remembering how exciting it was, television was, how exciting, but how removed from it I was where I grew up in upstate New York. And I grew up in a rural area, and there was our local TV station was 60 miles away. And, so to me, entertainment was always far away. It was always distant. And to produce this show with these kids who I adore, and now they're, a lot of them are grown up. Some have kids. Some, are married. It's 14 years since that first season. But I remember meeting them at, ages 9 to 12 and thinking, I'm going to give you kids an opportunity to do something I would have loved to do at your age, which is learn something, have fun, have access to parts of the zoo you can't have access to as a guest. We're giving you premium access as a competitor in this show, and you get to be on TV, and your episode's going to air, multiple times. And so I think that there was a bit of that childhood excitement for myself that made it so special, and giving that to them and making that a, kind of a driving force of why I wanted to make the show successful.
Yeah, and that's how anyone can look for success in anything they do. Create something that maybe didn't exist when you were younger that you wanted to see. Create that for someone else and adapt it in the for the current time.
Yeah.
Give just a nugget of advice for someone breaking into the industry.
I've given a lot of advice over the years, and I've gotten a lot of advice too, but I've given a lot of advice over the years. And one of the things I've noticed is when people ask for advice, they don't necessarily find themselves prepared to follow through with it, to execute it. And there's nothing more impressive to somebody giving you advice than to actually take it and do something with it. I mean, it doesn't always apply, it doesn't always work for you, that's fine. But when somebody you respect or somebody you seek advice from gives you advice, take it. Find yourself implementing it in some way and follow up with them. Hey, I remember the advice you gave me last month. I started doing that. Here's how it worked out for me. Because it shows that you took it seriously. I've had conversations with people and sat for hours and given them advice what to do, and they've come back to me 6 months later and asked for the exact same advice if they didn't take it the first time. Second bit of advice I would give, shouldn't say did, this is a big one. Second advice I would give is find a mentor. A lot of people talk about this. It's interesting because you need people in this business, whether you're creating videos or commercials or filmmaking or writing stories of any kind. Find people to talk to about what you're doing and get feedback. Have a sounding board. Find partners to collaborate with. All those people can be considered mentors because even if they're at your level, there's someone who's helping guide you, listen to you, support you. I think I went a long time in between careers without a mentor. I jumped into certain careers and didn't have one. I had one early on in radio, but I didn't have one throughout my TV news days, throughout other things. I didn't have somebody to go to and say, hey, this is overwhelming, or hey, what should I do here? I did have somebody who I considered a mentor, and he'd give me some outside advice. He wasn't working on the things I was working on, so I did have a mentor in a removed way, and he's still a good friend. But I mean, like if you're working in film in Dallas, if you're working in film in LA, find somebody who's on the ground there as your mentor. Find somebody who knows the market you're working in. Find somebody who knows what you're doing or trying to achieve and can steer you in certain directions and say, I wouldn't do this, but this is something else you might want to consider, or try talking to this person. Without a mentor, I don't know how you get anywhere. I mean, I've spun my wheels for years at times where I felt like I was trying to do this by myself. And I don't think you have a whole lot of success. And you certainly don't have much satisfaction if you're trying to do this by yourself and then getting frustrated. Find someone to collaborate with. Find people at any level to um, have a writers group. Have a conversation. Buy someone some coffee and ask them advice. I'd be I'd be I'd be you know I'd be the first person to say, find somebody who has an hour of time. Offer to buy them lunch or a cup of coffee and pick their brain. Ask them questions about what they do and what they would tell you not to do and what steps you can take. I mean, a lot of good professionals I've worked with are happy to share time and impart some wisdom, and they have a lot of wisdom to give. They just need to be asked.
That's really good advice. Uh, 'Cause when someone I hear about, and you probably hear about it a lot too, about a local kid in Rhode Island wants to be an actor, actress, be in film, be on TV sets, and they have this feeling they have to go to L.A. New York. I mean, New York's actually closer to Rhode Island, but they have to go to like in those big markets. But that's great advice to say start small, start in your community, find someone, network in your community with the same interests, and who can maybe be a mentor for you. It's just great advice to start in the local community. You don't have to expand far just yet.
Well, you can start anywhere you are. I mean, I think the beauty of the internet world now is that you can get information and start where you are and start creating and understanding what it is you want in particular. The hard part of this is that there's no blueprint for what you're doing. I mean, whether you want to be an actor or a filmmaker, there's no path that's already been created. It's like there's not a single path that's been created that's going to help you get to the point you want to get to. You have to build the path. You have to be the person who created because it doesn't exist. It's not like if you said I want to be, and this is not to diminish any other job, but if you said I want to be a chef, there's paths that are in place to be a chef. There's certain things you need to have. There's certain credentials in certain jobs you need to have. There's certain schools you can go to. With acting and filmmaking, in a lot of the arts, you're really inventing it because you may not want to work in commercials. You may want to work in film. You may want to be a writer of film and not write commercials, so you're not going to spend time writing commercials. You need to figure out what it is you want at the end of it. What do you want out of this whole thing? And then make your choices based on that now. So I went in a lot of directions. I wanted to do all kinds of things. I wasn't interested in one thing. I wanted to do everything. So I did everything. I'd done a lot of different things. But at the same time, if I'd spent the last 20 years just filmmaking, I'd be much further ahead. I'd be in a much different place. But that's not where I was 20 years ago. So you just have to figure out what is it you're building and how is it you figure out, what steps you're going to take to build it. Who do you talk to? Who do you bring in? Who do you collaborate with? What materials do you need? Where do you need to move to? Because you could be a filmmaker today in Rhode Island. You could be an actor in Rhode Island. It won't be the same as an actor in LA, but that's okay. You don't have to compare yourself to them because you're acting in Rhode Island and you're doing the best you can in Rhode Island, or upstate New York, for instance. So I think you just have to, I should say have to. I'm not a have to person. I think it's helpful if you say to yourself, I need to spend more time thinking about what I really want and making choices that get me what that thing.
What is a question that you wish people would ask you more of?
Oh my goodness, you're putting me on the spot with that one. Um, what is a question I wish more people would ask me?
I've
Um,
gotten a wide spectrum of answers on this too. Like as far as you want to work for me kind of thing, like getting the job, starting the job, or just advice.
that's a good range, actually. I think one thing that I don't often get asked is about the uniqueness of my life, my personal life, my upbringing, and things like that. Like people tend to assume, I get a lot of assumptions that I'm from where I live. So I've gotten assumptions that I'm from Texas. I lived in Wisconsin for a year, so I thought I was from Wisconsin. I've lived in Texas for the better part of the last what except for the last 4 years. I lived in Texas since 2001. People speak in Texas, but people don't have any clue about the makeup of my background. So I'm always interested in introducing that to people in some way. People never guess that I'm First Nations in Canada. I'm part of a Mohawk tribe. My biological father is Mohawk, registered um, with a band, the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte in Ontario. People never guess that. I mean, they don't know that kind of thing. I went to a K through 12 school, which means that my entire 13 years in K through 12 was in one building. Um, People don't typically know that. I didn't go to a middle school. It was basically like you were in kindergarten and all the way through 12th grade in the same building, from one end of the building to the other. So never left
Wow,
that
that
building the whole time. And
that is unique.
yeah, so it's like it's things like that come up for me that I realize I'm like, maybe maybe there's ways to introduce those bits of myself and introduce those aspects of myself, because it doesn't anything we introduce of ourselves like that let people know a little bit about how we're unique. We don't get looked at anymore like we're just generic. You're not one more person doing something that you're doing. You've got dimension and you've got nuances to yourself. So when I tell people I came from a K through 12 school where I lived in a rural area. I mean, I lived in a flashing light area where like there's one flashing light, and that's where I lived. There's four corners and a flashing light. Like we didn't have cable TV. Um, and something else that I've learned about myself is the things that I was ashamed about years ago. I actually kind of find amusing, and I'm proud to share now. Like we didn't have a phone until I was in eighth grade in my house. We didn't have a phone. There was no phone until I was in eighth grade, which looking back, it was pretty unusual, but there we were with no phone in our house. So, when you start accepting those parts of yourself and start embracing those parts of yourself, you start realizing it is what makes me unique. It may be bizarre to other people, but I got to get comfortable with it because it's the thing that's shaping the things I'm doing now. All that stuff that happened when I was growing up, all the stuff that's happened along the way is what's shaping the things I'm doing. It's influencing the choices I'm making now. So I got to start revealing some of that stuff. We need to tell ourselves, I got to start sharing some of that stuff because that's the good stuff. It's the weird, offbeat, like, unexpected stuff that creates some interesting dimensions in our lives.
Yeah, and what you said a minute ago about we're in this industry, we're often creating our own path. There's not a path created. And that's why I like it. Why I like doing it's unknown, it's uncertainty, and it's all exciting, scary, and it is definitely a lot more exciting.
Well, somebody once told me that they called it missionary work. It's not like being, traditional missionary, say a Christian missionary who's going to another country, but it's the idea that you're basically going out and having to um, build something from the ground up, create something new, start something brand new and fresh. And I think that we're really doing that anyway, aren't we? I mean, we're really, I think no matter what our vocation is, we're really creating new things every day. We just don't call it that necessarily. We think we're
Mm.
following a path. We think we're operating from inside, expectations. But the people who break the rules and the people who follow their, what do they say, they march to the beat of a different drummer. Like that's what they're doing. Like they're doing missionary work. They're breaking ground. They're doing something different. They're taking a different direction. It's a risk. I mean, I know people. I've worked with people for years who don't take risks, who are okay with being comfortable in the same space, the same place, the same job. They don't look beyond that. And you know, no, I have no disrespect for them, but I'm the exact opposite of that. I will leap and then build the net below me. I will leap off the building and then build the net below me to land on, as I'm going down, which is why I've jumped from different careers. I've jumped into different things I want to do. Hey, I want to do this, and then I go do it. Hey, I'd like to try this. Well, then let's go do that too. That's a little more dangerous, um, a little more risky in life to go. I'm just going to do where what my heart is taking me to, and I may not be fully prepared for it, but I'm going to do my best to make it work.
Say missionary, that's almost kind of accurate too. It takes little or a lot of faith to
Yeah.
just you put your blinders on, look in one direction, one focus, not you can veer off a little bit. It's not just about going straight all the time, but put the blinders on, focus on where you're going, do it, and have a little faith.
hmm I think I do meet people though who have that trouble with having faith. Like that's you know a hurdle for them where they're not willing to make that choice. I knew a guy years ago who got a job offer in a different state. Very talented guy. Got a job offer in a different state, and that would have meant giving up his two jobs. He had a main job where I met him, and he had a side job, which was a lucrative side job. And the two were kind of connected. The two jobs were kind of connected, and he got an offer to work somewhere else, and that would have meant uprooting everything, uprooting family, uprooting himself from that long term job, uprooting him from the side job, and starting over. And I look at people like that and realize, had he made that choice to do that way back when, he would be in a different place today. But he wasn't ready for it. He wasn't prepared to make that move. And so when I see people like that who are not prepared to make that move, I realize they're not ready to bet on themselves. They're not ready to gamble on themselves and say, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna gamble, and I know it. No matter what happens, I'm gonna make it work. Um, and that comes from fear. That's a survival mode thinking. It's a fear thinking that you're afraid, you're scared, you're frightened that something terrible is going to happen. Well, something terrible could happen if you stay at the same job for years. Your job could go out of business. You could get laid off. So negative things can happen when you stay in place. Just like potential negative things can happen if you take a leap. But you got to figure out what works for you.
Would you say the people who stop because they're they have the fear, they have they're going they're say, I'm gonna go direct this little sort get started. But what stops them, would you say, is their expectations were way too high and then they just fell short of their expectations? Would it be like lowering expectations a little bit? As or I know there's not.
I would say, well, I would say it's redefining what success looks like to you, because if you're measuring everything against what you think is going to happen, then you're going to be disappointed. Like if you're measuring everything against the standard you set of what you expect to happen and you don't get that, you're going to be disappointed. That's just the way expectations work. But if you look at it as a sense of, I was aiming for this, it's like people who say, I'm going to be a millionaire by 30. So what they're saying is by age 30, I'm going to be a millionaire or I'm a failure, rather than I'm going to aim for this. But if I don't get this, was I successful? Well, yeah, you were successful because you continued aiming for it. You made choices that led you in that direction. Even if you fell short, even if you're a thousandaire, you could still consider yourself a success because you were doing things that kept you on that path. And even if they didn't necessarily work, you tried something new. This measurement of I'm somehow a failure if I didn't meet this goal is, I think, is really just self-defeating. It's helpful to tell yourself, I'm aiming for something. I've got a goal in mind. But speaking of goals, so my teacher, Glenn Morshower, I like something that he said in his LA class about goals. Is that he talked about how people say, I'm going to be successful. I'm aiming for something. I have this goal in mind. And he worded it in a way that if you just show up like it's in your nature, you're already successful. So it's not like you're seeking to get to a finish line. So I tell myself this every day now because of Glenn, that when I get up, I'm successful as writer and director of The Legend of Marshall Dead. I'm successful right now. There's no, I have to pitch this, I have to finish this, pitch this, whatever. There's none of that. I'm successful in how I showed up today about this project. And because I feel successful already, I carry that forward in my work. I feel successful. I know I'm successful, and it influences my choices about how I see myself. And then I move forward with those feelings. If you're looking at it like some sort of outside goal, it's always going to be away from you. If you're saying like I'm gonna, it's like if you're saying I'm going to run a marathon for the first time, that's what, 26 kilometers. That's a goal. But if you say, I'm going to become a runner, or I am a runner, I'm going to show up as a runner, you're a runner now. You're running today. You may eventually get to a point where you can run the marathon, but you say, I'm a runner today, you show up as a runner, you're a runner. You don't have to have accomplished a marathon to become yourself a runner. So I've gotten rid of that goal type thinking. It's like, I'm successful today. You're successful today. You're successful because the reasons you're successful. I'm successful because the reasons I'm successful. And then we just move on from that. And we see, where that takes us and what it brings to us.
Those two most important words, I am, and then whatever you are, and then just go do what you say you are.
Mm-hmm.
I am, and people talk about being present, being okay with who you are. The past has happened, and you can say any of that, but what's important is I am.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about strengths. We can what you let's. What do you consider to be what you're best at? Like who are you or what are you today as far as a position, film position?
What am I? Like, what's my title?
Like what do you maybe consider yourself to be best at, or what
Oh.
is your bread and butter?
My bread and butter, I would say, is true stories. I mean, working in the genre of real things that happen, truth stories. I was always fascinated by biographies. I like real stories. I like knowing that these were true events, that these things really happened, even if there's a fictionalized version. Like most movies will, there's a percentage of that's been fictionalized, things have altered, that type of thing. But that's really, I think, where my passion is real people, real stories type thing. But when you ask that question, what it makes me think of is that the thing I think I feel like I'm known for, with a lot of people, is just listening. And this comes from wanting to know people's stories. So there's a quality of me that shows up everywhere I go where I just listen. And I used to hate that part of myself because I wanted to say things. I wanted to have things to say. I wanted to have my opinions and my thoughts out there. And I wanted people to know exactly what I thought. And I wanted to have the confidence to get those thoughts out. But then as I've evolved in that, I realized that what I've been gifted with as a writer is the ability to just listen and process and try to understand how other people are living and where other people are coming from. So I don't get stressed about not having things to say. I don't think I need to have a response to everything. It's how my good stories have come to me. The stories that I've written, the inspiration I've had, has come from just knowing when to shut up and listen and observe. And I do a lot of that. I'm most comfortable in that position of just watching other people, listening. I could be in a car, on a bus, on the street, in a mall. I'm just observing people, and I'm making mental notes of what I see and little behaviors of what I see, and things that delight me and things that surprise me. And um, I'm just an observer of the world mostly because I just try to understand how other people function outside of myself, because everyone's different. And, I feel like that's kind of how you learn as a writer, as you watch people and absorb what they're doing. So to me, like listening and observing, those are really my biggest strengths. I sometimes find myself wanting to comment on the things I'm seeing, and I'll sometimes say, like, you said this, or you did this, or I really liked how you did this, and I'll say that directly to people. And sometimes people get a little startled when they realize how closely you've been watching, how closely you've been paying attention, because I think a lot of human beings now are accustomed to people not paying attention, not being fully aware, not being fully present on their phones. And when you spend time with me, or I spend time with you, I'm paying attention. Like, I'm listening to the words you're using. I'm watching your facial expressions, and I'm noticing, your body movement and nonverbal body language, and that's the joy of being in the presence of someone else. Is that you get all that information. It's all information. Even the stuff they're not saying to you is communicating something. How they're sitting, how their posture is, how they walk, how they shook your hand, like all that stuff is just the juicy details of life and someone sharing with you.
Something even that I even noticed too, and I don't. just because someone may be talking, but it's the tone of the voice and it's everything that really tells me. So I'm more of an action guy myself. I look for what are they doing rather than they what are they saying, or what they doing is backing up what they're saying.
And not everybody has that though. I do recognize at times where you're going to talk to people who don't necessarily have the mindfulness or the synchronicity of words and deeds or tone. Like their tone might not match what they're saying, and I'm very understanding of that. Like not everybody who's happy to see me will demonstrate that in person, and then I'll get this message afterwards. It was really great talking to you, and I'm like, wow, that didn't come across in the conversation at all. But in this safe place where they're messaging me as a follow-up, they're clearly, saying that they enjoyed it. Well, I get that because my greatest joy about experiences doesn't come in the moment. Typically, it comes after the fact. It comes when I reflect on it. That was a lot of fun. When the pressure is sort of off, the conversation is done. I can start to reflect on what we talked about, what the experience was like. That was really fun. But I wasn't giddy and silly and excited while it was happening, and I wasn't demonstrating that. So I get that in other people too. That they don't always it doesn't always translate. Feelings don't always translate in the outside world. Sometimes people block at stuff, and so I give people the benefit of the doubt that even if they don't seem like they're enthused or interested, I want to look beyond that. So it's it's a little tricky sometimes to really understand what someone's feeling because they don't always show their cards.
Before I start to wrap up, because I want to I know I started recording a little later than we had planned, and I want to be respectful of time and everything. But going back to current production you're working on in Dallas, Texas, you're currently there right now, right?
That's right. I'm in Dallas. Actually in Carrollton.
And so, where do you see this going? Do you have you thought about that? I mean, as much as or just a little bit, really. I know you're knee deep in thinking about all the production and putting getting everyone on camera and all, but have you thought about like distribution and where do you see this going out when it gets to that point?
Well, we've made some changes to the story, to the overall story and how we packaged it, and that's been influencing my thoughts about distribution because originally it was an idea about characters in 1858. So it was an isolated story set in 1858. It was about specific people, Texas Rangers and a marshal and the Comanche people, and there was historical events attached to it. And so all of that's in the past, and nobody here today knows those people. You're going to see these characters, and you'll recognize traits about them. You'll know things about them based on the story and where it takes you. But to me, it was all isolated in 1858, and so this last these last elements of production are about making the story relevant to today. And so what we've got after Burton Gilliam, who people best know from Blazing Saddles, Mel Brooks' big successful Western comedy of the early '70s. Burton Gilliam is a Texas native. He's in the Dallas area, and he expressed an interest in joining our cast. And so I specifically wrote a character for him, just for Burton, and it's the character of a present day man in 2020 who's a patriarch of a Texas family who is revealing some secrets about his past that he's kept to himself. And now he's telling his family, he's telling his children, his grandchildren, his great grandchildren, on the occasion of his 80th birthday, hey, everybody, I've lied to you all these years. Here's the truth. And so, because we're using those scenes to ground this production and to look back now, our 1858 scenes will now conceivably be flashbacks. Because we're using those scenes, it ties into the fact that people today are asking questions about their own ancestry. They're digging into it. 23andMe, ancestry sites, things like that. That people are doing the DNA test. They're trying to understand where they come from, what their family trees really look like, what their lineage is, where it takes them back to. I wanted that to be the driving force of this story. So I feel like when it was just a Western, it could have taken us in a specific direction. Because now I feel like there's a bigger context around it. I'm starting to rethink where this needs to go, where people can see this, where they can have conversations about their own family history and what things they discover and what things get revealed and what things they don't want revealed, what skeletons in the closet they don't want to come out. So I don't know exactly what that is right now. Like I don't know where that goes. Who wants to watch that show? Because that's the show I have in mind where it's set today, but we're looking back. And so every time that, every episode, because this is going to be designed as an episodic series, is that every episode you have something setting something in motion today that goes back to 1858. That's a very different type of show than just 1858 Western adventures and the Texas settlers versus the Comanche people. This is more about making it universal. So anybody watching in any country could say, I get it because we're trying to figure out my family tree. I get it because we're trying to piece this together and we don't know who our great grandfather is. I think it makes it so much more accessible to audiences anywhere in the world.
And I know you said it, but uh, probably already. But one more time, the name of the production currently you're working on is
So we originally called this production Marshall Dead, which is the name that came up with was come up with by the executive producer Lauren Margulies. Lauren and Jade Roberts, who's a producer, and Jade plays the Marshall. They began talking in the spring and collaborating on this idea. And Jade, who's a good friend of mine, brought me into this. So I was collaborating with them from Studio City, conferencing in and developing. And at that point, we were just calling it Marshall Deck. It was just Marshall Deck. As we got into the design element of it and thinking about a bigger name for it, we moved into some other options, and then we settled on the title, The Legend of Marshall Dead. It's a great title. I mean, the idea is that it's not Marshall Dead just as a character. It's a Marshall. It's a legend of this character. We're basically explaining to an audience that this is a made up story. It's kind of giving a wink to the audience that this is a legend. This is a folk tale type of situation. But it also sounds a little more impressive, I think, than just Marshall Dead. I mean, we'll call it Marshall Dead for short. We'll refer to it as that a lot. But the official title is The Legend of Marshall Dead.
it sounds like it's very like a folk tale kind of thing, except like for the fact that he's going to be sitting down and telling the truth rather than maybe embellishing on a story, and he's going to look back and now he's telling the truth.
Yeah, and he can mix it up too, because I think that there's going to be some things that he makes up. There's some things that he's going to stretch the truth, like, and he may not be stretching the truth. He may be just repeating what he was told. He may be repeating the stories he was told, and that might have been stretching the truth when he heard it say from his father or grandfather. So there's a chance that he was given false information way back when, and he's exaggerated it, or he's forgotten and he's recreated some of it. But the idea is that he's telling them for the first time about these people in their ancestry, and they have to decide if he's telling the truth or not. They're going to have to be the ones to say, is great granddad, is he being straight with us? Is he making this up? Like what pieces of this is he telling us that are true? Because they don't know any of it. I mean, they know none of these stories. So they're kind of in a situation where they have to either just trust, or they're going to be questioning a lot and wanting more information.
So I have 3 final questions here. I like to. I know that a lot of what I was asking was unknown. Actually, I usually like go more of a script of questions, but these are totally not. They're meant to be harder a little bit, but not too hard. What do you want to learn from someone who has seen success multiple times? Maybe someone you haven't learned from yet.
What specifically do I want to learn from them?
Or who would you want to learn from?
Um, I've been watching the master classes. A friend of mine got me a free subscription to the master classes online. I've had a chance to watch Steve Martin, Judd Apatow, Aaron Sorkin, people who've had a tremendous amount of success in the world of writing. With Steve Martin, comedy as well. With Aaron Sorkin, mostly drama, films and television. Um, I've loved the one with Judd Apatow because what I'm learning from him, and he's done this in his movies, is taking real life things and put them into his movies, real life moments. And so, what I want to learn more of from people like Judd Apatow is how do I take the thing that happened in my life and put it somewhere? Where do I look when I'm creating something? Where do I specifically look? What strategy do I use to specifically look back to my life and find a moment from my life and put it in what I'm doing? So I mean, like, so I already have a project, for example. So where can I look back at my life and fill something in that project with, something that really happened? That's there's two directions to go in that. One is you could start with a project you have and look back at your life. Another is you could look at your life and find ideas for a project. But I'm talking about specifically, Judd has figured out ways to embed his comedy films with real life things that happen and things that work. I mean, these aren't good things to happen. These are awkward moments, embarrassing moments, regret, things like that, that I want to figure out how to create for my project those real life moments from my experiences and consciously do it, not just unconsciously do it when I'm writing a script, but consciously pick a moment and go, I want to write about this moment, and I want to find some way to take that moment in my life and now give it some purpose by adding it to this scene or to this particular script.
Why do you think the film industry, filmmaking, storytelling is so important in our world today?
I think filmmaking is important in our world today because we spend a lot of time on ourselves and we know what we're thinking and we don't necessarily have access to other people's thoughts, other people's lives. And filmmaking is an interesting way you can take a 90-minute story or a short film, for example. Like our project's going to be under 25 minutes. You take that time and get somebody immersed into the world of those characters very, very quickly and getting a sense of seeing what the world looks like to them. And to me, what it comes down to is this: it's perspective taking. If we can give an audience a chance to take a different perspective on something, we can enlighten them. We can entertain them while we're doing that, but we can really enlighten them and say, you may not be the person you're seeing in this story, but you're going to find reasons to connect with that person. You're going to find something about that person, something about their choices, something about their obstacles that you do connect with. And to me, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful way to show what humans are really like. I mean, we look different. We sound different, we use different words. Some of us have accents. Some of us have more education. Some of us have less. Some of us have more money. Some of us have less. But there's a universal quality to our experiences. I mean, there's things that I can watch, and I've never been someone with money. I can watch movies about people with absolutely, infinite amounts of money, and I can relate to certain things they're experiencing. Because it's not about the money; it's about humans. It's about the human experience. What are they up against? What's the struggle for them? How is that real to them? If someone lost, $10 million, I haven't owned $10 million, but I could watch that character and go, what's something that would be equivalent to lose for me? What would the thing be for me? It wouldn't be $10 million, but it could be losing something else. And so I find my brain working like that, like trying to translate what I'm seeing in the story to my own life, which is what we all do anyway, right? We make it personal to ourselves. It's not about the characters in the film. It's about us. It's about what it means to us. And so if we give the audiences more of these stories, more variety, more different characters, more unique experiences, more unique stories from different writers and directors, then we introduce them to more about what human beings are really like. And we don't just show them the same 10 stories over and over, or told the same 10 ways. We give them nuances and diversity and things that allow them to go, that could be told in a different way, or that experience could be seen in a different way. I've had that experience, but this story showed me a different light, or maybe it showed me a way to problem solve. You know what's funny about this is that you asked me this question, is that I remember specifically how a movie impacted my life. I can't remember the name of the movie, but I'll tell you, it's an interesting thing that around the time my daughter was 5 years old, I was watching a movie with Jason Bateman, and my daughter was 5 years old in kindergarten. I got a call to go to the school because my daughter, like a lot of 5-year-olds and kids that age, got head lice. And the very first thought I had was, I just watched a movie with Jason Bateman about how to respond to head lice in a child, and what you need to do with toys and furniture and clothes. Suddenly, that movie became educational. Even though it's meant to be entertaining, that movie was ridiculously educational because I knew all the steps. It was all in the scenes that he was in. So in that case, a movie had this really specific educational point to it, which I liked. I like people like learning new things, like how do things work in a movie. When you show characters or scenes or process, how does it work to make coffee or fix a car or build a house? Like movies can show us that stuff. They can be really educational and show us step by step process of how something is done.
And before I ask the final questions, where do you like to hang out? Like, and people say hi to you. Come get for people to like come like social media, Facebook, Twitter. Where are you on the most?
I'm probably on Facebook and Instagram the most. Um, I like both of them. I feel like they're very different platforms for social media. I think with Facebook, I tend to talk to people as friends who I have this comfortable relationship with, and I share things with, and I share some offbeat things. And with Instagram, I'm more focused on career, the things I'm creating, the content I'm creating. On my Instagram, I've shared things about my stand-up comedy. I've shared things about filmmaking and acting, and so there's very much it is a more professional or a more career focus on that. And on Facebook, it's a mix of both. I mean, I like to share stuff that I'm doing personally. I talk to people like as if they're a friend. I mean, I think that most of my shares are about, hey, this is what's going on with me. Um, you know, just to here's a peek in what's happening in my life. And I've heard from people over time that who are connected with me on Facebook that they get a sense of what I'm doing. They get a strong sense of challenge that I've had. I've been very authentic about difficulties on there. They've also seen that I've moved a lot and I've traveled a lot and moved around. So I think my friends on Facebook get a sense that um, you know they get a sense of some of the dimensions of my life, some of the unique challenges, some of the unique work, some of the unique experiences that I like to share there.
Do you have an actual page? I know I connected with you on your with your personal page, but do you have a page or do you have specific handles on whether if they're the same
On
on
my
Instagram?
Well, on Facebook, it's Mark J Isaac. So I use Facebook.com/ Mark J Isaac is my acting and directing page. On Instagram, I use my handle from a lot of other things. In 2008, I was working as a writer at an ad agency in Houston, and they said, come up with a title for yourself. And I came up with the title of Word Mature, which is a little bit of a nod to my French Canadian heritage through my mom. So wordmasseur@gmail.com is what I use as an email address. I use Word Masseur as my handle on Twitter. Word Masseur is how you find me on Instagram. It's a really comfortable term I use now. So when I do a lot of writing for clients, it's Word Masseur, a guy who massages words. I mean, is a great way to describe what I do. And so that's how people find me on Instagram and Twitter. But the Facebook is Mark J Isaacs. That's the one I use for that.
Can you just spell that real quickly?
Yeah, sure. It's facebook.com backslash, get that word out, backslash Mark J Isaacs, MarcJisaacs. So I'm a Mark with a C, and that always gets misspelled. Even relatives misspell Mark. Um, it's tough being a Mark with a C, and I respect people who have names that are common but have a slightly varied spelling, because we always suffer that misspelling from people. Even when people are on Facebook and message me, they'll misspell Mark with a K, and I'm like, oh, really? It's right there in front of you. it's on the page. It's part of what you're looking at. But I just find it humorous now that I find it entertaining when people spell my name with a K. I've just lived this long with it being misspelled. I've gotten over it being incorrect at this point.
And just spelling for word masseur. I just want to get
Sure,
the right
word
spellings
masseur.
down.
Yeah, word masseur. WORDMASSEUR.
Masseur.
EUR.
All right. And final question, bit of a to spark some creativeness in you. Imagine it's coming off like an inspiration how I was inspired to like do start up this podcast and all. The person who was doing that came up with 3 lessons at the end of your life that if everything else was erased and you only had 3 lessons that you had to write down, what were they? I kind of changed that around, adapted to film, and what imagine on your last day, many years from now, you did everything you wanted to do. Imagine what it'll be like and how you see your last day playing out up into everything comes to a close. Like how would your perfect last day end?
If I'm willing and physically capable to be working, I feel my best when I'm working. I don't feel anything close to it when I'm not working. A sense of joy, peace, challenge, adventure, love, anxiety, all the negative and positive in some ways, all like the mix of emotion, the highs of being on a set. Like I would love my last day to be where I'm actually working on something, where I'm on a set, where I'm directing, where I'm doing some other function, and I'm contributing to a story. I don't think there's a better way to go out for me. Like I feel like it's such a passion. I feel at my best. I have my most peaceful feeling in my heart about having something to do that's a mission, that's a purpose. And so I can see myself on my last day in the future, just you know, I'm walking on a set and I'm pointing out something, or I'm having a conversation with an actor, and I'm sharing a cup of coffee with one of the crew, or I'm sharing a story to a young actor or a young crew member about like an experience I had on The Legend of Marshall Dead. I'm imparting wisdom, which I like to do. I like to give advice and share some stories. You know I think that even at that point, I'm still asking questions. On that last day, I'm asking questions about how something works on set. Maybe it's new technology. By that point, I don't understand. I've not experienced it, and I might be asking that person using it, "Hey, tell me how that works. Show me how you do that. Show me how that gets done." So yeah, I'm giving wisdom. I'm sharing it. I'm working with a purpose, and I'm still curious about things around me that I don't understand.
That's how you do it. Stay curious even when you know you're you're towards the end. You're getting up there, maybe at 100 years old. 100-year-old director still going strong.
That could be Clint Eastwood at some point. He's getting there.
Well, I had great. This was a great conversation, and look to having more in the future about some other productions you'll be working on within Texas, or maybe elsewhere in Canada. Or I look forward to having you on again, talking about the next thing you'll be doing.
Well, Thomas, you've been a tremendous joy. I mean, I've really enjoyed the time we spent together today on the phone, and the questions you've asked me have it's invited me to dig deep and think a little more about some of the things that you're talking about. And I think I'll be taking this conversation forward with me to this production and reflecting on making it even better because of what we talked about today.
And thank you for just sharing that real quickly. I acknowledge you for always wanting to be curious and continuing spread knowledge in the industry to newcomers to the people who have been there for years. You just continue to spread knowledge like you're at it at the first time, and just say thank you again. I had such a great time talking with the director Mark Isaacs about working on set on The Legend of Marshall Dead, working with Burton Gilliam, his past works as an actor, as a SAG actor. Go say hey to him. He's on Facebook mostly and Instagram. You can find him at Word Monsieur on Instagram and Twitter. I connected him initially on Facebook, so he's on there. Go find him, look him up, and go check out his other works on Amazon Prime, The Example and Turning the Hands of Time. I can't wait to have him back on again, talk about future productions that he'll be a part of. And if you enjoyed this episode, go right now to whatever app you're listening to this episode on and give a review on what you thought. I always look for feedback on to what you guys want to listen to more, and I want to provide all of that valuable information that you guys want. So let me know what you liked, what you didn't like, what I can change, what I can do better, and that's what it's all about. So until the next one, enjoy the journey, trust and love the process.